In this tutorial, we're going to be using some modeling clay and a Bendy figurine to create a claymation character. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sand off all the details, and I'm going to actually use the sandpaper all over on the character. And the reason why we do this is, first of all, we're removing any facial features or anything that we might be tempted to use in our final character, so that we 100% are committed to creating something original. And second of all, it roughens up the surface of the plastic, which allows the plastic and the clay to stick to each other better on a rough surface than on a smooth surface. You also don't want the surface to be too smooth because it'll cause reflections when you create your claymation. So notice how I'm blending the clay with my thumbs onto the plastic figurine. That will keep it from popping off. Just kind of smooth it in there at the edge. You don't need to change the overall structure of the figurine. The whole point of using an armature or skeleton to start with is that you can worry more about the character and less about the structure or how it's going to stick together or hold itself up. But I'm still going to concern myself with making sure the clay sticks to it by blending it in at the edges with my thumb and smoothing it on, making it look like it's actually part of the original figurine and not simply stuck on. So for the teeth, instead of making individual teeth, try making them as an entire strip. Any little hack you can use that will create a shortcut is advisable. So in this case, making an entire row of teeth instead of one at a time was helpful. You can also see that flattening the clay and using a scissors is one way you can create shapes. And notice I'm using that blending motion again to reattach the upper jaw. Try not to mix the colors too much. Use them just as they are, separate. With clay animation, having contrasting colors next to each other will translate on film better than having very subtle shapes that might get lost in the details. So having very outrageously exaggerated teeth works very well for this sort of activity. I've decided to give him sort of a crest, almost like some of those duck-bill dinosaurs. But he's an imaginary monster. I'm not trying to make him any sort of realistic creature. Please do not create any sort of figurine based on any sort of copyrighted character. I don't want to see any Sonic the Hedgehogs or Stitch from Lilo and Stitch or anything like that. Create your own characters. Create your own monsters. So I'm just using little balls of black clay for the eyes and little balls of white clay for the whites of the eyes. I'll stick them together and I'll use a toothpick to create the pupil. Again, I'm not blending them in because obviously that would mix the colors. So I just have to mush them on there and hope they don't fall off. That's the nice thing, though, about the non-hardening modeling clay is because it has an oil in it, the pieces do stick to each other pretty well, yet they remain soft. You do not want to use anything like Model Magic or air dry clay or any sort of clay that hardens. So I just made a little coil or snake, and I'm using that for the gums. But you want clay that's going to never dry. So modeling clay or oil-based play clay is what you want. Do not use Play-Doh because left out in the air it will dry. So what you're looking for is oil-based modeling clay. It has to say modeling clay on it. Now, the reason why I'm putting a toothpick in to make the tail is I want the creature that I'm making to be able to stand up. But I don't want to give it any sort of a prop in the back that I have to avoid showing to the camera. I want him to be able to turn around 360 degrees without worrying about some sort of stilt or prop showing. So by creating a tail and hiding a toothpick inside that tail, now my little character is going to be able to stand up by himself without falling over and without having some sort of hidden thing propping him up that doesn't look like it makes sense. So that's another reason to create something silly like a robot, a space alien, or a monster, as opposed to a realistic creature, because it gives you the freedom to add stuff just for structural reasons. So if it was a person, it wouldn't make any sense for him to have a tail, but if it's a monster, well, monsters can look like anything. Now I'm just texturizing it a little bit to kind of give it scales or whatnot. You can add any sort of detail you want. Again, there's no wrong way to do it. Try and make all the features sort of exaggerated and cute or goofy or silly. The toothpick is a really great way of adding details. Notice I added the little nostrils and stuff. Again, if you add something on and it's the same color, take a minute to use your fingers and blend it at the edges so it doesn't fall off. I'm going to leave the arms alone because I like the fact that they're bendy and I can use them expressively. And I think they work well with this character. Try and look at your character from all sides, front, back, and the side, and see if any part doesn't make sense or looks wrong, and tweak it a little bit before you begin filming. Because, a lot of times when you're sculpting, you're looking at it from only one side because we're so used to drawing. But with a sculpture, you really do have to turn it around and make sure it makes sense from all angles. Now, I made another character the other day, and I just put a little toothpick in the back of him to make him stand up. But I decided to pull that out and make a tail instead because it worked so well with my little yellow creature. You don't necessarily have to put a toothpick in the tail. If you make it wide enough and thick enough and you make it at the right angle, it'll work to hold your character up without the toothpick. And that has the added advantage that you can bend it and turn it and use it expressively. He's more likely to be able to wag his tail if there's no toothpick in there. I do prefer a toothpick because I think it keeps it stiffer and I don't have to worry about my character flopping over later. It also gives me a chance to play around with the angle of the tail, making sure that it doesn't make him, too lopsided. So here are my little guys. And it also helps to use these bendy figures because you know that all the characters in your story are going to end up roughly the same scale as each other if you have identical armatures to start with. So that's how I made my little simple claymation figures just for fun.